You're sitting there staring at your phone, wondering why the person who once couldn't get enough of you now treats you like an option. It hurts, doesn't it? Being ignored feels like you're invisible, like everything you gave meant nothing. And the worst part is watching them give someone else the attention you deserve. You start questioning your worth, your value, your standards. But let me tell you something real. This isn't about losing them. It's about losing yourself trying to keep someone who stopped choosing you. You deserve more than chasing crumbs from someone who once had the feast. Now, here's the truth. Nobody wants to say you don't get respect by begging for attention. You get it by setting standards and enforcing them without apology. When you lose emotional control, you give away power. When you chase, you lower your value. The game changes when you decide your time, energy, and presence are earned, not given freely. This is about discipline, not desperation, about choosing yourself even when it feels uncomfortable. Because real attraction starts when you stop trying to be chosen and start acting like you already are. The shift begins the moment you believe it fully. Most people get this wrong right from the start. When someone pulls away, your instinct is to lean in. You text more, you check in more, you try to remind them what they're missing. You think effort will fix distance. But what you don't realize is that chasing someone who is already stepping back doesn't bring them closer. It confirms to them that they don't have to work for you anymore. And the moment someone feels they don't have to earn you, the value drops whether they admit it or not. When you withdraw, you're not playing games, you're restoring balance. Right now, the dynamic is tilted. You're giving more attention, more energy, more emotional investment than you're receiving. That imbalance creates pressure, and pressure kills attraction. Nobody leans towards something that feels like it's chasing them. But people are naturally drawn to what feels slightly out of reach, something they have to move toward, something that makes them curious again. Think about how it was in the beginning. You weren't always available. You had your own life, your own rhythm, your own focus. They had to step into your world, not the other way around. Somewhere along the line, that flipped. You started adjusting your schedule, your mood, even your self-worth around their behavior. That's where the problem began. Not because you cared, but because you cared in a way that made you forget yourself. Withdrawing means you stop over-explaining, stop over-texting, stop over-giving. If they take hours to reply, you don't sit there analyzing every minute. You go live your life. If they don't initiate, you don't fill the silence just to keep the connection alive. Silence is not your enemy. Silence is information. It shows you where you really stand without illusions. And here's the uncomfortable part. When you withdraw, it will feel like you're losing them. Your mind will panic. You'll think, if I don't reach out, they'll forget me. But understand this. If someone can forget you simply because you stopped chasing them, you were never being valued properly in the first place. What you're really afraid of isn't losing them. It's losing the illusion of control you thought you had by constantly trying. There's power in stepping back. It forces the other person to feel your absence instead of your pressure. Right now, they're used to your presence being constant, predictable, easy. When that disappears even slightly, it disrupts their comfort. They start to notice the silence where your attention used to be. And human nature kicks in. We question what changed. We get curious. We lean in to understand. But this only works if it's real. You can't fake withdrawal while secretly hoping for an instant reaction. This isn't about timing a response or pretending to be busy. It's about genuinely shifting your focus back to yourself. You fill your time with things that actually matter. Your growth, your peace, your environment. You stop making them the center of your emotional world. Let's make it practical. If you used to text first every morning, you stop. If you used to double text when they didn't reply, you don't. If you used to always be available when they call, you allow yourself to miss a call and return it when it suits your schedule. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Your time is not on demand anymore. and watch what happens internally. At first, it feels unnatural. You'll want to break your own rules. But as you stay consistent, something shifts. You start feeling less anxious, less reactive. You realize your mood isn't tied to their behavior anymore. That's when you start regaining control, not over them, but over yourself. And that's the only control that actually matters. What's interesting is that people can feel this shift without you saying a word. Energy changes, the desperation fades, the neediness disappears, and suddenly the same person who was distant may start reaching out more, asking questions, trying to reconnect, not because you begged them to, but because you stopped. Now understand this clearly, withdrawal is not manipulation, it's correction. It's you stepping out of a position where you were over-investing and returning to a place of balance. If they come back, it's because they chose to step forward, not because you forced them. And if they don't, then you've already done the most important thing. You've stopped abandoning yourself for someone who was already pulling away. Either way, you win something far more valuable than their attention. You get your standards back, your clarity back, and your emotional independence back. And from that place, everything changes. How you respond, how you attract, and what you're willing to accept moving forward. When people hear rebuild your value, they often think it means posting better pictures, acting unbothered, or pretending you're busy. That's surface level thinking. Real value is not performed. It is built quietly in how you live when nobody is watching and when the person you care about is no longer paying attention. And here's the truth most people struggle to accept. The moment you start trying to look valuable instead of actually becoming valuable, you stay stuck in the same emotional position you're trying to escape. Rebuilding your value starts the moment you stop making one person the center of your emotional identity. Right now, your thoughts are probably orbiting around them, what they're doing, who they're with, why they changed, whether they'll come back. That mental obsession is not love. It's dependency disguised as attachment. And dependency is loud even when you're silent. People can feel when your energy is still tied to them, even if you're not speaking. So the first shift is internal. You redirect that energy, not into revenge, not into proving a point, but into rebuilding the parts of your life that you neglected while trying to hold on to someone else. Your routines, your health, your discipline, your environment, your goals. You start doing things not because they will notice, but because you need to respect yourself again. Think about it like this. When your life becomes centered around one person, everything else starts shrinking. Your ambitions slow down. Your social circle weakens. Your confidence becomes reactive instead of stable. You're no longer moving through life with direction. You're waiting for emotional signals from someone who is not even matching your effort. That version of you is not attractive, not because you are not enough, but because you are not grounded. Now imagine something different. You wake up and your first thought is not them. You have structure to your day. You are building something, your fitness, your skills, your income, your mindset. You are learning to enjoy your own company again. You're not posting for attention. You're living for alignment. That shift alone changes how you carry yourself. Your tone changes. Your presence changes. Even your silence feels different. And here's where psychology comes in. People respond more strongly to consistency than intensity. When someone sees you constantly improving without announcing it, without begging for validation, it creates curiosity. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because you are no longer emotionally predictable. You're no longer reacting to their presence or absence. You're becoming someone whose life is moving forward regardless. But let's go deeper. Rebuilding value also means fixing what you tolerate, because your standards define your identity more than your words ever will. If you accept inconsistent communication, mixed signals, emotional confusion, or half-effort attention, you are teaching people how to treat you. And once people learn they can access you without effort, They rarely upgrade their behavior on their own. So you start changing what you accept. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just quietly. You stop responding instantly when you used to. You stop over-explaining your feelings when they weren't even making an effort to understand you. You stop being available to confusion. You start valuing clarity over potential. And that alone shifts everything. There is also a powerful but uncomfortable truth here. Rebuilding your value means accepting that you may no longer be the same emotionally accessible person you used to be for them. You are no longer giving unlimited access to your attention. You are no longer emotionally free on demand. That change will confuse people who benefited from your previous version. And confusion often creates interest, but only when it is backed by self-respect, not emotional manipulation. The strongest transformation happens when your lifestyle starts reflecting your self-worth. You begin to take care of yourself in ways that are not performative. You sleep better. You train your mind and body. You fix small things you've been ignoring. You reconnect with people who actually bring balance to your life. You start becoming someone who doesn't need validation because you are actively creating internal stability. And here's the irony. The less you chase external validation, the more naturally it returns. Not because you are trying to get it, but because you are no longer dependent on it. That shift is felt in your energy. People sense when they are no longer the center of your emotional world. And when that happens, they often start recalibrating how they see you. But the real win is not whether they come back or not. That is secondary. The real win is that you stop negotiating your worth based on someone else's attention. You stop adjusting your emotional identity to match someone else's inconsistency. You become someone who is stable whether they stay or leave. At that point, your value is no longer something you are trying to rebuild for someone else to notice. It is something you are living every day, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Emotional control is where most people lose the game without even realizing they've started playing it. Because when emotions are driving your actions, you stop responding to reality and start reacting to fear. You don't text because it's smart. You text because you're anxious. You don't stay quiet because it's powerful. You stay quiet while overthinking and hoping they notice. That difference matters. One is discipline. The other is emotional instability in disguise. The moment someone pulls away, your emotional system goes into overdrive. You start interpreting everything through fear. A delayed reply becomes disrespect. A short message becomes rejection. A lack of attention becomes proof that you're losing them. But here's what's actually happening. You are not reacting to facts. You are reacting to your attachment. And attachment without control will always push you into behavior that lowers your position, not improves it. When you lose emotional control, you start trying to fix discomfort instead of fixing the situation. And those are not the same thing. Discomfort tells you to act immediately. Wisdom tells you to pause and observe. Discomfort makes you chase clarity from someone who is being unclear. Wisdom makes you step back and see what their consistency is actually showing you. Most people choose comfort over clarity, and that's why they repeat the same emotional cycles over and over again. Now let's be real about something. You don't lose people because you care too much. You lose them because you express that care in a way that removes your dignity from the equation. There is a difference between emotional honesty and emotional flooding. Honesty says, I value you, but I also value myself. Flooding says, I will adjust everything about me just to not lose you. And people starts with what you do when you feel triggered, because you will get triggered. You will see something that bothers you. You will feel ignored. You will feel replaced. That part is normal. The difference is what you do next. Do you act immediately or do you wait until your emotions settle? Because whatever you do in the peak of emotion usually costs you more than it gives you. Let's make it practical. You feel the urge to text because they haven't replied. Instead of reacting, you sit with that urge. not to suppress it, but to observe it. You ask yourself a simple question. If I send this message right now, am I doing it from strength or from anxiety? If it's anxiety, you don't move. You let the feeling pass, and it will pass. Emotional urgency always feels permanent in the moment, but it is temporary. Another layer of emotional control is learning to separate interpretation from reality. Your mind will create stories. It will say they don't care anymore. They've moved on. I'm being replaced. But those are interpretations, not confirmed facts. Reality is what is consistently shown over time, not what your emotions suggest in a single moment of silence. If you start treating every emotional thought as truth, you will constantly react to illusions. Now here's where power shifts. When you stop reacting emotionally, you start becoming unpredictable in a healthy way. Not chaotic, not manipulative, but stable. And stability is powerful because someone who is emotionally stable cannot be easily controlled, pressured, or pulled into reactive behavior. They don't respond to every silence. They don't chase every gap. They don't fall apart just because the energy shifts. People often think control is about being cold or detached. It's not. It's about being intentional. You can still care. You can still feel. But you don't let those feelings drive impulsive actions. You process internally before you express externally. That pause is where your power is built. And here's something most people never realize. Emotional control changes how others treat you. When you are reactive, people unconsciously learn that they can trigger you and get a response. When you are stable, they learn that your energy is not easily accessible. And when access becomes uncertain, value increases in their perception. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped overexposing your emotional reactions. There will be moments where staying calm feels like losing. That's the illusion. Your mind will tell you that silence means weakness, that not responding means you are being forgotten. But in reality, every time you choose not to react emotionally, you are training your mind to prioritize respect over impulse. And that training compounds over time. You become someone who doesn't get pulled into emotional chaos easily. The real shift happens when you stop needing immediate emotional relief. Most impulsive behavior is not about connection. It's about relief. You feel discomfort and you want to remove it quickly. So you text, you check, you chase. But control means you stop using other people as a way to regulate your emotional state. You learn to sit in discomfort without escaping it through action that weakens you. And over time, something changes internally. You stop feeling controlled by every message or lack of message. You stop interpreting distance as danger. You start seeing space as neutral instead of negative. That's when your decisions become cleaner. You no longer act to fix emotions. You act based on clarity. When you reach that level, your presence carries a different weight. Not because you're trying to appear strong, but because you are no longer emotionally unstable in how you engage, and that stability becomes noticeable. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way you no longer chase what used to trigger you. Access is everything in human behavior. People don't value what they can endlessly reach without effort. They value what feels earned, what requires attention, what isn't guaranteed. And when someone once had unlimited emotional access to you, your time, your attention, your availability, and you suddenly change that pattern, it disrupts their comfort more than any emotional speech ever could. Most people get this wrong. They think making someone miss you is about ignoring them or playing hard to get. That's surface thinking. Real value doesn't come from games. It comes from structure, from boundaries, from a clear internal rule that says, my presence is not automatic. It is conditional on respect, consistency, and effort. When you make someone earn access to you again, you are not punishing them. You are resetting the standard of interaction. Because what often happens in relationships or connections is gradual imbalance. At first, both people invest. Then slowly, one person starts overgiving. They become always available, always responsive, always emotionally open. And without realizing it, they remove the friction that creates appreciation. Friction is not negativity. Friction is what creates awareness of value. When something is slightly difficult to access, the mind assigns it importance. When something is always available, the mind starts treating it as background. That's human psychology, not opinion. So when you step back and reintroduce boundaries, you are not changing your personality in the access level. You stop responding instantly. You stop prioritizing them over your own plans. You stop making yourself emotionally available on demand, and instead of explaining it, you simply live it. This is where most people fail. They try to communicate boundaries verbally instead of embodying them. They say things like, I won't tolerate this anymore, but continue acting the same way emotionally. That creates confusion, not respect. Real boundaries are not announced, they are observed. People don't believe what you say about your standard. They believe what you consistently allow. When access is unlimited, interest declines. When access is structured, attention sharpens. Suddenly they notice your absence more clearly. Not because you disappeared, but because you are no longer filling every gap they left behind. You are no longer available to rescue inconsistency. And that shift forces them to confront something they avoided before. You are not as easily replaceable in their emotional routine as they assumed. But here's the part people misunderstand. You are not playing unavailable. You are becoming unavailable to misalignment. There is a difference. The other is self-respect. One is reactive, the other is intentional. You are not withdrawing to provoke a reaction. You are withdrawing to restore order in how you are treated. When someone wants access to you again, they now have to step differently. They have to initiate. They have to show consistency. They have to move with clarity instead of confusion, because you are no longer rewarding uncertainty with attention. That is a major shift in dynamics. It removes the comfort of assumption and replaces it with effort. And effort changes perception. When people have to invest energy to reach you emotionally again, they start reassessing your value. Not because you became different overnight, but because the experience of accessing you changed. What was once easy now requires intention. And the human mind responds strongly to that contrast. You will also notice something internally as you implement this shift. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You might feel like you are losing connection. You might feel like silence is creating distance. But what's actually happening is recalibration. The old dynamic is breaking and a new one is forming. And during transitions, uncertainty feels like loss, even when it's actually correction. One of the strongest forms of emotional power is when your presence is no longer a default setting in someone's life. They can no longer assume you will always respond the same way. Not because you are unpredictable emotionally, but because you are now intentional with your engagement. That unpredictability in access, not emotion, creates attention. And here is something important. When you change access, you also change perception of self-worth in your own mind. Because every time you choose not to overextend yourself for inconsistent effort, you are reinforcing internal standards. You are telling yourself without words that you are no longer available for imbalance. That internal reinforcement is what eventually stabilizes your identity. Over time, people begin to adjust. Some will step forward and meet your new standard. Others will step back because they were only comfortable with easy access. Both outcomes serve clarity, but what changes most is your position. You are no longer in a cycle of overgiving and emotional depletion. You are in a space where your presence has structure, and when your presence has structure, it carries weight. Not because you are withholding love, but because you are no longer offering unlimited access to something that is valuable. At the end of the day, this was never about chasing someone or trying to force a reaction. It was about returning to yourself. Because the moment you start losing your emotional balance for someone who is inconsistent with you, you are no longer in a relationship with them. you're in a battle with your own self-worth. Real power is not in over-explaining, over-giving, or overstaying where you are not valued. Real power is in restraint, in knowing when to step back, in understanding that silence, discipline, and emotional control speak louder than desperation ever will. And here's the truth, most people only learn after they lose themselves. What is meant to align with you will not require you to abandon yourself. When you raise your standards, you don't lose love, you filter it. You don't lose people, you lose access for those who never respected it. So the real shift is simple but not easy. Stop measuring your worth by who stays when you chase, and start measuring it by what remains when you finally stop.